Today's episode is brought to you by Real Estate Radio Experts. Hey man, leveling up is not that hard. Let me tell you something. Let me share something with you about today's economy that you probably know. But what's one of the reasons why I'm doing this show is that, you know, the new economy that we live in, right? We live in a Yelp, in a review kind of economy, right? We all want to see that restaurant has good reviews, that it has social proof. And you know what? Starting and running your business is much the same. We live in an influence economy. And you know what? Exposure is the new social capital. That's the new currency we're dealing with. So the question that you should be asking yourself is, as Gary Vaynerchuk would say, we are all media companies. How are you guys getting more exposure? Now, you can do it with radio. Go to Real Estate Radio Experts. Check that out. If you're not quite ready for radio, maybe your team's not there, maybe you think the budget's going to be too much, you can do a podcast just like this. And, and we've launched a service there. We can go to check it out. You can go to Viralcast, VIRALK, Viralcast with a K, AST. Viralcast.com. We at the show want to help you build your business in the fastest, most profitable way, and getting mass exposure is the best way we know how. Welcome to Super Agents Live. This is the one place where you can come and hear the most successful people in real estate. You'll hear how these super agents built their businesses, how they stay productive, and how they stay motivated. Who am I? My name's Toby Salgado, and I made my first $1 million in real estate. Yeah. And I'm your host for the next 30 minutes while we talk to yet another amazing real estate entrepreneur. Stay tuned.
Let's go! Yeah!
Now, before we get to today's content, I just want to tell you a little housekeeping. You can find us on Twitter at Super Agents Live. You can join the conversation with the hashtag Unpack That Idea. And, I know you're not going to want to miss future episodes like this one. And today's guest, I'll tell you, we bring him on. He's a solo guy, right? A lot of the people that we bring on to the show have teams, right? And sometimes giant teams, right? You know, when somebody comes on, they go, yeah, I have a team of 45. That's not a team. That's a whole office. So, most of you guys are like, hey, I don't have a team. Maybe you have an admin, maybe you don't. And we can talk about, if you don't, you should. And look, one of the things we talk about on School of Profit, we talk about when you should get an admin. And let me tell you when. It's when you recognize that you're doing work that is less than what you want to make per hour. If you want to make $100 per hour, live that way, act that way. If you can outsource this particular task or job for less than that, do it. That's when you should get an admin. It's right now. So anyhow, today's guest is a solo guy. He does about 100 deals a year. So yes, it's possible. Hopefully you like this one. That's it. And again, go to superagentslive.com, download my free ebook, and join the conversation there. I'd love to see you. All right. I hope you like today's episode. Hey guys, one quick thing before we get to the episode. I want to extend a heartfelt thanks for you guys, or to you guys. You guys are the ones, ever since 2013, we started doing this show. We are a top 100 show on iTunes, in the business category. Uber competitive, and no matter what, we are in this little show, man. We're top 100, and we owe it to you guys. So I appreciate, and you guys say you owe it to me. Look, we work together. We're a team. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for doing things like sharing it with the people in your office and in your town. Every month we have about 50,000 listeners tune in. So it's pretty cool to be able to make an impact on people's businesses and lives out there. So, one quick thing, if you felt so moved, anytime we get a review and rating on the show, that really helps us on iTunes. So if you have a minute, go to iTunes, submit a rating or review. All right. Hey, hope you like today's episode. All right, I am excited about today's guest. You guys, I try to mix it up a little bit, right? I mean, we have people that come on, they do 900 transactions, mega teams in the 40s. Today's guest doesn't have a team. It's him. He does it. He does have the listing. He has office staff, of course, that helps him out. But in terms of the front end stuff, it's all this guy. He's in Portland, Oregon. Average sales about 250. And this year he'll do 93 deals. It's a bit down from last year at 112. But I really want to get into how this one guy goes out and does 100 deals. He sells on his own one house every 3 days. So I'm thrilled to have today's guest, Lawrence Belland. Hey, Lawrence, thanks for taking the time out today, man.
Hey, Toby, thanks for thinking of me.
So listen, I've given the audience a brief overview, just the nuts and bolts of your business. But before we get to the business, tell us a little bit about yourself. We want to get to know who the man is behind the machine that you've built out there.
Yeah, I've been in the business for quite a while, longer than I probably want to admit, but it's going to be 38 years next May.
Wow.
And I'm licensed in 3 states, in California, Oregon, and Washington. I have a home in Southern California, in Laguna. I've been spending most of my time in Portland, and I rarely get to Washington, but that represents about 60% of our business. It comes out of the Seattle Puget Sound area. And I never get up there. The last time I was there on business was when I signed my contract with John L. Scott, and that was about 5 years ago.
Okay, so you've been doing real estate for almost 4 decades. Did you do any? By the way, your voice, you sound very young. You do not have a tired sounding voice at all. Have you always sold real estate, Lawrence?
No, I started sales, and I decided I was 25 years old. I was doing very well. I mean, my buddies were all renting. I owned a home. And I just thought, I was born and raised here in Oregon. If I don't get out of here now another 6 months, I'd be crazy to ever leave because I was doing that well. So
wow.
I did. I packed up and I headed to Southern California. And, once I got there, I mean, I'm just a small town guy, and I hit L.A., and I was driving from Los Angeles to Orange County for about 2 hours of concrete. I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to do anything in conventional residential retail sales like I was doing here in Oregon successfully. So I went into lending and became a residential lender, and I worked for 3 different companies in 3 years. I was the top producer in each one of those companies. Then I started my own company, and I grew that up into having, back then you couldn't have a boiler room in Aliso Viejo, calling all 50 states. You had to have brick and mortar locations, and I expanded that out to 3 states. Again, I wanted to keep ties to Portland because my friends and family lived here, and so I opened up offices in Oregon and Idaho and Washington. And then I did that for 9 years, and I sold that company in the early 90s. And I was taking some time off, and I heard the chairman and CEO of Home Savings of America, and he talked about this thing called a short sale. And I saw what's happening in the economy. I thought, this sounds really interesting. So I wrote this program. It took me about 7 months. Got my broker's license, in California, and I hung up with Coldwell Banker, and then that year, July of '93, but the next 5 months, I made $265,000 doing short sales, and I thought, boy, if this could last 2 years, this would be great. I have some fun with it, and it went on for 7. So, and from then on, we just transitioned into retail, kind of put my program on the shelf, and in 2005. The short sales, they started to rear their ugly head again, and so we've been doing quite a few of those.
That's interesting.
In 3 states.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, so I've lived in Aliso Viejo, and when you lived, back in those days, Aliso Viejo was like nothing. I don't know if you've been there recently. It's way.
I still have my home there.
Okay.
I get through there all the time. Yeah, because I drive through there from the airport. I cruise through there. So, it's quite a little city now. It's a nice little city.
Oh yeah. So. Now you spent 7 months writing this program. What is that? Tell us what that is.
Well, it was a relational database program, and what it did is it took all of the data on once a public filing of a notice of default is filed. You get a tremendous amount of information on that property and that homeowner. You don't get quite as much today as you did then, but I wrote a program that would parse all that information, and it would crank out a very specific letter. It was a 4-page letter that went over every option that was available to that homeowner and the ramifications of what that would mean. And it also, now I didn't have to because they put a moratorium on the tax of forgiveness of debt, that phantom income. But I calculated what that was going to be to them if they did nothing, allowed that to go to foreclosure. And so it was a very, very complete and specific letter that went out to a very targeted audience. And of course, that's the key with direct mail. You better have a good list. And of course, these lists were perfect. And I just started mailing them out, and it was great. It was just, I just getting call after call after call. And
but you,
I just, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I mean, in terms of when people think about short sales, even you go back to after the last crash in 08, 09, I mean, the banks, it's just surprising to me that you were doing short sales in the 90s because the banks did not know how to do them. Even in 09, people started to figure them out. I think, mid 2010 and I think beyond is when, B of A figured it out and Wells Fargo figured it out and all that stuff. I mean, you were just, your radar was tuned to this like crazy.
It made perfect sense for me when I heard the CEO of Home Savings, the chairman and CEO, which I think WAMU bought those guys. It just made perfect sense. I thought, you know what, this is a great opportunity and a great out for those homeowners. And back then, these weren't strategic short sales like we see today. I mean, when the banks started giving money away, I mean, they were like drug dealers. It was like so intoxicating to get. I got buddies that got $1 million on their signature because they had a 750 or 775 risk score.
Yeah.
And back then, you still had to have some skin in the game. And when they did come out with those easy quals, the people that were actually being foreclosed on, it wasn't because of that. It's because they actually lost their job. If you recall that recession back then, it was a pretty bad thing. And so you didn't have the things by design where people were taking this money out and just saying, I'll just let it go into foreclosure and do a short sale. So that's the difference between this time around and last time around. Last time those hardships were genuine, and this time the hardship it's almost meaningless. They're gonna approve that short sale if it makes sense to the bank as far as net present value.
Yeah. So you mentioned back then you could write this very targeted letter. And it was 4 pages, and you could talk about this what you call phantom income, or when people do a short sale or settle a second or whatever, they get a 1099-C, and they have to report it as income. Now, this is your interview, not mine. Talk a little bit about that Debt Forgiveness Act that Congress put in place, and what you think the future for that act will be.
Well, I'll tell you, that was really more of a political grandstanding. There's really been no issue for a homeowner as far as the phantom income if it was their primary residence. It's never been that way. If it's their primary residence, and the main thing is if they were insolvent at the time of the event, then there's no tax due. I mean, when they came out with that law, they also came out with that out. So, I mean, and I always knew that. They never had anything to worry about. And to this day, they don't have anything to worry about. That law doesn't have to be renewed again, and they're still going to have that out. And the bar to determine insolvency with the IRS is much lower than a bankruptcy. You don't have to file a bankruptcy. It's just simple. What are the amount of your income? What's the amount of your debt and your assets and liabilities? That's it. So it's, I think that it's just made my job a little easier, but, for those that know, it was really meaningless. It was just really a meaningless law, but it sure got a lot of press.
Interesting. Well, I mean, so look, that insolvency thing is, it is, if, you add up all your debts and all your assets, and if your debts are more than your asset,
you're insolvent.
You're insolvent. So, and if you think about that, right? So if you went and bought a $500,000 house, right? You put 3% down on it. And that's your debt, dude. Your debt is $500,000. That means you have to have $500,000 somewhere else. So pretty much, I guess now that I think about it, I guess that makes sense. I think the thing is this. I mean, what made sense for a lot of people is people were doing strategic defaults. And if you have a couple rentals, and you're going to strategically default on your house because it's underwater, then that law makes sense for them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's really no downside to a short sale for anybody, and I can count on one hand I'm sure I've done over 2,000 short sales easily. The number of lenders that have actually threatened to pursue for the deficiency,
right?
And I've never heard back from my client that that's ever happened.
Yeah, I think there has been a few cases.
Just a threat.
I think there has been a few cases, but they're very few and far between. So for you, where do you see? Look, I can't believe, number one, you said you did these short sales 93 to 2000. You got into lending or whatever. In 2005, you started doing them again. Now, I'm in San Diego. 2005, we were still going gangbusters. How did you?
Yeah, it was the end of 2005.
Okay.
There was a client of ours, Anthony, nice young guy, and he was being transferred. He had just bought a home in Rancho Santa Margarita down in Orange County.
Yep.
And 3 months after he closed on that, and of course he got an 80-20, he got 100% financing, and 3 months after he closed on that, he was being transferred to Texas, so he had to sell his house. I said, no problem. Even then things were kind of going up. But what happened was there was a prepayment penalty on that second. And so for a guy that was just about going to break even after commissions and, closing costs and all that stuff, with that prepayment penalty, he was underwater. I mean, it was a short sale. So we had to negotiate that prepayment penalty out of the deal. And when we started looking at that, we started looking at the financing, the curbing of the accelerated appreciation, which was really starting to subside. And again, I think it came up in 05, and we closed it right at the end of 05, January of 06. And by the first quarter of 06, we just said, okay, this is the writing on the wall. We stopped representing buyers altogether, just wouldn't do it. I mean, we had people that said, no, we recommend that you rent, sit on the sidelines and rent and watch and see what happens. And for those that did, I mean, they still send us emails, saying, man, thank you so much. That was the best advice anybody ever gave us. I can't even believe that you gave it to us. They were so eager to buy.
Right.
But yeah, they started up, and then, as you know, 06, 07 was it was a free fall, but it started declining in 06. And if somebody was in a situation like Anthony where they did 100% financing and they weren't in the property very long, they had that prepayment penalty because they all had them.
Yeah, but so for a guy like you, Lawrence, I mean, you have this deep knowledge of how to do short sales, right? You were way ahead of the curve than everybody else. You knew how to do them. You saw the writing on the wall before everybody else. I mean, I can't believe you're a guy that's just you alone. I mean, it seems like, if you would have jumped on this in 07 to 2011, you could have had this giant business. What happened?
Well, it was pretty big. I mean, back then, I was the Coldwell Banker golden boy. I had one assistant, and, I was bringing in 60 listings a month.
Wow.
But what I did is I expanded that out because Orange County got to be, this was great. It's going on good in Orange County, but I expanded it out to Orange County, San Bernardino, Riverside, and then eventually San Diego. And I never went out to any of these properties, and I rarely met the sellers. I would just use DHL and send them out the listing documentation. Once I got it back, then I would make an appointment, and I'd make all the appointments on one day. I mean, I would be driving like crazy. And looking at the property, shooting the pictures, putting on the lockbox, and that was it. And then what I did is I just enlisted the help of other agents in those counties. A lot of them were Remax agents. They're just different agents, and I paid them to go out. They could put their sign on the property. I didn't care, and they went out and they did all the listing coordination for me. And that's my same model today. For instance, up in Seattle, I've got 3 listing coordinators up there. They do work for John L. Scott, although I did have one that worked for Coldwell Banker, and I've had them work for other companies. Doesn't matter. And so they're used to doing BPOs for $45. Well, I give them $150 to go out there and shoot the pictures, put on the lockbox, do the due diligence, and then they come back and they actually do the valuation and they put it in the Northwest MLS for me. And then when the deal closes, they get an extra $100. So they get $250 for the same amount of work that they would do a BPO for $45. And they get all the buyer calls. So, and then when we submit the buyer calls to them, then we get a 25% referral fee. So that's how that works. I've just enlisted the help of other agents and paid them.
That's a
great
great model.
We don't close every deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's worked great. And my letter is the same. Of course, I've had to change it for the different markets. Versus when I brought it up to Portland, they said, I don't think this is going to work up here, And so I turned it on, and after a year, I was John L. Scott's #1 agent, and I am to this day. And And then I said, well, my best friend lived in Issaquah, Washington. And I used to go up there and visit him and his wife, and then he'd be going to work on Monday, and I'd just be hanging out doing nothing. So I thought, well, maybe I'll get my broker's license here, and I'll just bring my dog and pony show up to the Seattle area, which I did. And now that's our biggest market. I just turned it on, and they modified the program to comply with the Washington state laws, and then off we go.
That's amazing, Lawrence.
That's great.
Yeah, you're the first guy that's ever come on the show with that kind of a model. So let me pick your brain a little bit, and I'm going to do this really for my audience. I mean, I think certainly you always hear on the show, hey, know your inventory, blah blah blah. You need to be able to add value. So I want you to educate them a little bit on your view of the future. So I want to talk about short sales for a second now. If we go back to 2011, right, 2012, if you did a short sale, the common deal was that, hey, that's okay. You're going to do a short sale, and you're eligible to buy a house in 2 years. Now, the banks have moved that bar today. So now they literally, the people that were coming up and they're like, hey, I'm coming up on my 2 years, I can buy another house. The banks have moved that timeline out. Talk to us about I don't want to ask anything in particular because you know much better than I. So talk to us about that.
Well, that timeline, that bar's moved all over the place. And I'll tell you, my prognosis is that bar is going to come down to probably zero or maybe 6 months, and certainly no longer than a year, when they realize that we need the buyers in the market. I mean, they've eliminated our first-time buyers by student debt.
Yeah.
That's just killing everybody. My partner, Bernadette, her son has got his master's degree. He's making good money. He's got a great job, international sales manager for this company, and he's got $1,500 a month in student debt. He can't afford to buy a house as much as they'd like to, and that's a big concern. So without the first-time buyers, we don't have the move-up buyers, and so that's really stifling our market. And I think that what we're going to have next year, 2015 and 2016, and I've always said, even back in 2011 or 2012, from what I could see from the number and types of loans that were originated in 07 and 08 and 09, then the potential defaults of those loans was going to have us pushed out into 2016. And I still believe that. And it might even go beyond that because I think we've had a protracted, I'm not saying that we're in a recession, but I think that we are. And it's just been protracted. So I think there's going to be a lot more short sales next year, and there'll be some in 2016. I don't see that going away. It's not going to be it is a big part of our business now, but it's the biggest part of our unit volume, but it's not the biggest part of our revenue volume. That's going back into the higher end retail sales, which is fun. I mean, that's a whole other thing that we've been gearing towards in terms of how we market and how we present ourselves to them. That's been very successful.
And I want to talk a little bit about that, but again, I want to just utilize all the knowledge you have to educate my
Sure.
audience on this. So are you telling us that we heard, if we go back to 2011, we heard all this talk of this phantom inventory, or there was another word for it, I think. Or no, it was phantom inventory, right?
The shadow inventory.
Yeah, shadow inventory.
Yeah.
You said phantom income, and that stuck with me earlier.
That's fine.
So do you believe, Lawrence, that this shadow inventory does exist and it's gonna hit us?
Oh, without a doubt. There's no doubt about it. I've got listings that were foreclosed on 3 years ago, and they're still sitting vacant. And I'm sure your audience has got just as many examples of that same thing. And what my feeling is what's going to happen is that the banks, when they're going to raise interest rates, and what we've discovered is that banks have never really known much about real estate. The only thing they really knew about it has been historically just an awesome piece of collateral for the money that they want to lend against. And so for decades, generations, a house has always been great collateral. And then, but when the banks started giving money away, and when price became irrelevant, if they could make the payment, they'd pay the price. Well, they shot themselves in the foot. And so my feeling is when you've got these millions of homes, and there's millions of them sitting on the sidelines, and not just the ones that have been foreclosed on, but the ones that have been in default for years and haven't been foreclosed on because they finally wised up and said, wait a minute, why would I want to foreclose on this property and leave it vacant when I can keep the homeowner in there not making a payment. At least they're going to maintain it. The heat's going to be on. It's not going to have mold and mildew. It's not going to have issues. And so my feeling is they're going to raise rates, and I think they're going to go up quite a bit. But what the banks are going to do is they're going to start to not flood the market, but they're going to start releasing their properties into the market to maintain affordability so that they can continue to make those loans at higher interest rates. But the values of the homes are staying down so that those higher interest rates are still affordable. So it's going to be where we are today, except what they're going to do. It's like a teeter-totter. The rates are going to go up, values are going to go down, and they still will be able to do the same amount of loan volume. Because, the banks don't care about anything but making money. I think we've realized that. My opinion is, if you've seen what I've seen, they're criminal organizations that are aided and abetted by the federal government. I mean, if you saw the things I did, actual felonies. So that's my prognosis. I think short sales is going to be around.
Yeah, okay. That's great. What I don't know if I can ask you for a timeline on when you think interest rates will start to go up.
So I think they're poised now. I think that there's they're spring loaded and ready to bounce. We're probably going to see something in the first quarter next year. Now, although I've said that all year this year, and shockingly, they've been really low, and they even dropped, which just shocked me. So that just can't continue to go on. The Fed can't continue to print money like they've been doing, and rates are going to go up. They have to. But my feeling is, listen, back in 1989, I had my mortgage company, and I bought a property, and my friends, they just couldn't believe the rate I got, even though it was my company. Of course I was going to get a great rate. But that was a 30-year fixed rate loan at 10 3/8, A paper. Everybody else was getting 11, 10 7/8, 11 8. They couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So at that point, 10 3/8, today we're at, it's absurd how low rates are. Hard money loans today are 8%.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. So if rates go up to 6.5% historically, is that a big deal? No, I don't think so. It's still a low rate.
Yeah. Well. So okay. In terms of the Fed keeping our rates maybe artificially low, is there any tie-in with what we owe China? We owe China, I don't know, $2 trillion or some crazy number. Does that keeping our domestic interest rates low? I wonder if that helps decrease our payments. Carrying that debt from China.
The international, I think that is going to have some kind of a play. I think what's more than the debt that they carry of ours, I think it's more of the investment that they're making in the U.S. housing market. I think China now is, they're the number one investors in American residential real estate. They surpassed Canada, which is a lot. It's billions of dollars. So I think that will stifle those purchases in those markets, but then they're very picky in the markets that they're.
Yeah, that's New York. That's Manhattan. That's Beverly Hills. That's all the really really expensive price.
Florida, all along the Sun Belt. Yeah, Washington D.C., New York, Los Angeles. So, but I'm not sure how that's going to affect us. I'm not looking at that macro level. But.
Okay, no, I was curious. You're obviously a super smart guy. Earlier, you said to us that the Debt Forgiveness Act of, I think it was 2011 or 2012, it didn't make any difference, right? We talked about that already, the insolvency bit. But I want you to couple that with the student loan debt. Now, student loans are they're insidious. You can't get rid of them. You can't bankrupt them out. You are on the hook for that. And that's a big business, especially with, all the privatization of colleges where people, it's pay to play and you get a diploma and you really don't get an education. You said that those student loans are hurting our first-time home buyers, which in turn affects the move-up buyers. Do you think that needs to fundamentally change where you can bankrupt out, your student debt?
I don't know if they should. Well, I think in a last resort, to force a student to BK out of their student debt, I think is really that's not right. especially with what they've done for the banks. I mean, if they're going to bail out the banks that are just these huge corporations that have the wealth of those things are going to a very, very small portion of, extremely small portion of the population. They should bail the kids out. They should forgive that debt, or at least allow them to refinance it, because they can't even refinance it.
Got it.
And it's I think it's really it's a poor reflection on our government, on how they're treated. And they talk about education, and this is the future of America is let's keep our educated youth here in the States instead of the foreigners coming here and taking our education and then taking it back to their countries. But they're not doing anything to help them with that. And that's what's stifling. And I think that's really what's stifling our housing recovery. And we can't have an economic recovery without housing. It's just not going to happen. There's too many people are affected in a transaction. I mean, go and look at how many hundreds of people are affected in one single transaction. It's pretty prevalent.
No, I agree. But I mean, so you bring up an interesting point. Again, I also believe we're still in this recession. But if you look at the raw job numbers, it says something different. Unfortunately, the job numbers that we're looking at are all low-paid, blue collar jobs or service jobs. But everybody was saying housing will not come back until employment normalizes. But we didn't see that. We didn't see employment normalizing, but we did see housing come back. How do you explain that?
It's just lower interest rates,
okay.
And they have softened up the underwriting requirements. They have to. I mean, just now, they just came out now. Fannie Freddie, the GSAs, they're coming out now with 3% down payment loans.
Yeah, but they're still
that was something that they said they would never do again. I mean, they wouldn't do that again, and here they are. They have to. They've got to make it affordable.
Are we ever going to get back to? I'm sorry. Go, Lawrence.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying.
No, I was going to say, as far as our unemployment numbers, those are skewed too, because that's a rolling average, and after a year, if you haven't found a job, they just don't count you.
That's right.
That's the G6 number. I mean, that's really an absurd number, and I can't believe the American public buys into that.
Yeah.
Because if we're really looking to the top employment figures we had, real employment 10 years ago, and where we are today, and I got to think we're probably about 15%, 16% unemployed. It's really a tragic figure.
Yeah, that number would not surprise me. So, one of the other problems today with just housing and going out and buying a house is, in 2005, you literally, again, if you had a 750 score and you could sign, they'll give you $1 million and another 200 on a home equity line. Today, it's very, very stringent, the underwriting. What is needed to get a loan. When do you think we're going to get? Will we ever get back to that? Easy money, and what is the timeline for these underwriting guidelines to be less restrictive?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's a good idea to get back to the free money, which is what that was. I mean, there was really no underwriting guidelines. I mean, if you could fog a mirror and you had the right risk score, you were in. That New Century, those guys that were located in Irvine, California. I mean, they developed a program where they could approve you in 8 seconds. And of course, those were the guys that when they went down, that was the fuse that just blew up the whole market. So I think they just have to have reasonable guidelines, just something that says, prove your income, and if you're self-employed, then they need to come up with some, of course, different guidelines, because what's a self-employed person trying to do? They're trying to write off everything to avoid paying taxes. And so, fundamentally, without just making a political interview,
it's already there, man. We're already deep in this. So.
I'm a big believer in the fair tax. That's where it's a 23% national consumption tax. Abolish the IRS. There's no taxes of any kind, no estate taxes, no payroll taxes. My payroll will be much easier. Everybody's payroll. When you buy something new, brand new, you pay 23% on top of it. That way, if you like to buy, you want to go to garage sales or shop at flea markets, good for you. Put your money in the bank. Now the banks have more money because people are saving that they can lend, and they can keep the money here in the United States and foster growth here, rather than this stifling. I mean, that's a regressive. Income tax is very regressive. The more you make, the more you pay. That doesn't make any sense. It should be an entrepreneurial type thing.
Yeah.
Make as much as you want, but when you buy something, then you pay the tax on it. And I think the sales tax is very fair. At least how the fair tax is is presented. So
yeah, no, I agree
but
with
anyway,
that, and I think
I digress.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, look, I think our audience should hear this kind of stuff because not everybody's as sophisticated as you are. And I would agree with you. You know, Forbes a long time ago when he was running, he wanted to do a flat tax. I think it was a flat 13. And
it's still an income tax. It's still an income tax, and that's regressive.
No, listen, I'm in agreement with you. I'm just saying, and I think if people knew, all the taxes we actually do pay, if you add in the sales tax, you add in, the gas tax, all that stuff, we're paying, especially here in California, a tremendous amount, 40% of our income goes to those kind of taxes. So again, going back to, look, let me tell you my situation, right? So in terms of getting a loan or refinancing, so I have mortgages on 2 houses. I own another 4 houses free and clear. I have enough money that I could pay off the houses I do have mortgages on. But even with all that, because I am self-employed, I cannot refinance my house. To me, that is craziness.
Yeah, that's absurd because that income you have on those 4 properties free and clear, I mean, that should be able to debt service anything you want on your primary residence. I mean, that's just absurd. It's just absurd.
So when I agree with you, it's absurd. At what point do we that we get some rationality in this banking system that we have today?
Yeah, it's all going to be based on, I think on supply and demand. If housing sales really start to slow, the banks are going to change things up. The GSAs are going to change things up. They have to keep that moving. They just have to. It's just too big of an element in our national economy is to not have housing there, apparent and strong. And it's been weak and lackadaisical. I mean, you could say, okay, it's really been picking up, but it's been picking up from what? I mean, when you go back to 07, 08, 09, I mean, 10, I mean, anything would be an improvement because it drops so fast and furious.
Yeah.
So they just have to get some reasonable underwriting guidelines. They need to loosen up. They need to free up our first-time home buyers. They're shackled to student debt, which is just, and they've got those guys that got the best jobs. We're not talking about, the guys that are working at McDonald's or Home Depot or wherever, selling car phones. These are good paying jobs that they're fettered with student debt that's preventing them from entering the housing market, and we have to have that.
Yeah.
So we just have to have that.
So just again, we've talked about this a few times, but I want to get your opinion. So if we go back to the Debt Forgiveness Act, they were going to sunset it. It sunsetted, I think, 2012, Q4, late Q4. They upped it in 2013. What is going to happen in 2014? Does it go away, or do they extend it another year? Because again, this is a political movement. Does the administration keep extending it until the elections happen in 2016, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to. I mean, again, to me, it doesn't make it won't affect my business at all. And for those homeowners that really know, and they don't, and that's what they're really playing to is their fears that they're going to have this huge taxable event. But if they understood what's out there, and it's actually, I think it's IRS Form 982 or 998, something like that. It's just a form. It's just a couple of check boxes. You fill it out and you submit that in. Boom. No tax on the deficiency.
Right.
So, and by the way, you have it's a 1099-C for the cancellation of debt in a short sale. It's a 1099-A for the abandonment of debt on a foreclosure.
Got it.
So you get that either way. You're gonna get that 1099 no matter what happens. It's just how they classify it.
Right.
But as long as you know what you can do, then whether they extend that or not, it's irrelevant.
Well, I'll tell you,
unless you get a lot of money, unless it's a strategic default.
Yeah.
And you got some bucks in the bank. Yeah, you might have an issue.
Yeah. Well, look, I think I appreciate you coming on the show, Lawrence, and I think that I think there's a book in your future. I think that if no, I'm serious. I think that if you had the right media person, I think that you're a guy that could be on TV shows left and right. I don't know why you're not. Maybe it's just not your bit, but I think if you started writing some press releases and getting it out there on PR Web, I think you'd get some airtime. So listen, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you just a couple finish to wrap up. And the first question, I don't ask this very often. It's a crazy question, but I save it for guys like you, and it's this. what's something I should have asked you or that we should have talked about that I didn't bring up?
I think it would have been helpful to your audience is what are the things that we do use to market, because I'm an early adopter. There's some things that I'm the first there, but I'm also the first. We do a lot of research before. We're slow to hire, quick to fire. The same I do with my marketing, and we've done a lot of things in marketing that some people think was really successful. But I would say, man, what are the things that you've tried that have worked, and what are the things you've tried that were just miserable failures?
Can you talk about those?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I would say I don't know how many people are familiar with SmartSip. Okay, and SmartSip I think is I've got friends that use these. Part of my mastermind group. These guys use SmartSip, and they love them. And when it was presented to me, they said, well, you got to do tie up at least 2,000 homes. And I said, well, okay, I get that, So I tied up 15,000 homes.
Wow.
I didn't tie up 2. And so there goes 20% of the amount of homes you tie up. So we were marketing for it was 15 and change. It was about 3,400 homes. And I did that for 8 months. It was very expensive to do that, but I just thought, okay, if their math is correct, and I get what you're telling me, but what happened was that their data for that area, the multiplier in terms of how much more those 3,400 homes, the residents of those 3,400 homes were going to sell over the what do you call that? The standard group, or the group as a whole. It went from, I think they sold it to me at like a 3.2 times. It was 3.2 times I'm in. Well, towards the end, every month it started dropping down. It got down to 1.5. And so 1.5, I go, what I'm spending in postage, what I'm paying you, I could be mailing to everybody and not missing those people that your algorithm is missing. And I could do more mailings and get more business that way. So, after 8 months, I just said, it was terrible. So, but that's just my experience. I'm not sure. And, I got buddies in other parts of the country that, they're tying up 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 homes, and they seem to be doing okay.
Well, look, let me just comment on that really quickly. And for everybody in the audience, SmartZip has an algorithm. If you guys don't know, they have an algorithm, and what they do is they take a data set, right? In this case, 15,000 homes, and they look at search history from your IP address, and they bounce your history against 2,000 data points, and they supposedly can tell you as the agent, the person paying for the service, the top 20% of people that are most likely to move. And I can tell you, Lauren,
in the next 12 months.
In the next 12 months. And I can tell you from my perspective, talking with people on the show, I love the story, but most people say it was a waste of money.
Yeah, when the rubber hits the road, it just wasn't the data. It just wasn't working out. At least not for me.
Yeah. And so what
some of the other things, direct mail is always been successful for us. If you have a good list, besides, forget about the short sales, but we pick out areas, and we use, now the post office came out with EDD, every door direct mail. It's a fabulous service. You can't afford not to do direct mail. We send out 6 by 11 inch, 6 by 9 inch postcards, full color, full bleed, both sides, saturated area. We mail out, 10 to 15,000 postcards a month. That's been very successful for us with EDDM, and depends on how much you get your postcards printed for. We ours done for 8.5 cents, so we're out the door at about a quarter for each home. The bold leads, prime seller leads.
Hold on, wait, real quick. Let me go back. So it cost you about 25 cents, and you're doing about 10,000. How did you get that list? Is it because you have to have a good list. How did you acquire the list to mail?
Well, that particular list is we're just going to every single home in an area called Happy Valley. This is for our retail marketing. The price point over there, the average home is about $5.25. And so we continually, every listing, every sale, we continually to mail into there. So every time I mail those cards, and even if I was to go into another area and mail those cards out, and I don't mail the average traditional agent, they might mail 100, 150. The minimum amount I've ever mailed has been about 2,600, and we usually mail between 4,000 and 5,000 per listing, and we're mailing that around our launch date. So it takes us 10 to 14 days to prepare a retail listing for its launch date, and then we mail that number of postcards out announcing that, which is the open house. We don't even let an agent into the property until that launch date. And I drive anywhere from 25 to 100 people in a 2-hour window into those properties, and usually within a week after that, we have the property in escrow. It's very effective in how we present the property and how we promote it.
Got it. Okay, interesting.
So it's just we really work those areas where the dollar volume is.
And you were just
sense.
When I interrupted you were talking about bold leads.
Yeah, the valuation sites. A lot of my buddies use bold leads. I use prime seller leads. Matter of fact, I've got the whole Portland metropolitan area. I've got the exclusive for prime seller leads, but I like prime seller leads, and I've evaluated both of them. And there's some other sites out there. I know Commissions Inc.'s got. We were with Commissions Inc. for a while. Didn't really like the quality of the lead, but again, I've got a lot of buddies that use Commissions Inc. very successfly. They love them. And you have Boomtown and Tiger Leads, and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Last year, our referral business, we don't let our clients. We have a client retention program that is second to none. They get touches from us. Sometimes once a week, at least every month. We give them. Everybody gets a subscription to Sunset Magazine. They get that once a month. It's all packaged with our name on it. It's branded to us. So 14% of our sales last year came off referrals, which was we had 20 sales off referrals. Fitzgerald Coaching. If anybody ever gets a call from those guys, boy, that was a big waste of money. I stroked a check for $10,000 to those guys, and they were supposed to guarantee us for that it was going to be 25 listings, and it would keep going on until we got 25 listings. That was 3 or 4 years ago. I've never gotten a listing from them.
Holy
no.
Well, and who?
Yeah. So
say their
that
name.
was a $10,000. That was a $10,000. Just a waste of money.
Wait, tell me the name
and
of that.
Plus, they get a 25% rate. Besides that, when they do get you a listing, they get a 25% referral fee. So you'd think they'd have an incentive to get that going. So I mean, they're in it for the upfront cash. That was my mistake, because you could have got in for $5,000 or $10,000. So it could have been 10 listings for $5,000 or 25 listings for $10,000. And I'm just a value guy, so yeah. I stroked a check for $10,000.
But hold on, Lawrence. What is the name of this company or this service again? Fitzgerald
Coaching. And he came out of Mike Ferry organization. They're based in New York. They just have an outbound, calling team in there. They're just making calls to the FSBOs and expireds and all that stuff, and trying to get you in. And so
that's good stuff, man. This is great stuff to know, man. Because a lot of people, they can't. If $10,000 is a lot of money to anybody, but a guy like you, right? You don't lose any sleep over it. A lot of people be like, that's.
Well, I don't like losing any money. I'm all about making money. But again, we're an early adopter, and I did this. They said, well, we can give you some references. I said, give me 10. And so I did. I called 10 agents all across the country, and these guys are all saying, hey, I would never move forward without these guys in my business plan. On and on and on. So I mean, I really went through the vetting process. It just is not working in our market. I mean, we still give them that information to make those calls, but they can't set anything up.
Golly, man. Okay. So what else? So
I'm looking at my list here of our other things that were good and bad. Zillow. We do a lot of business with Zillow. We're kind of paring that down, and I'll tell you, this is what I feel is the best thing you can do with Zillow is pick out any zip code, the cheapest one you can find, go in there and become a premier agent, and then really get your testimonials up. I mean, if you can have your numbers up, your past production, past 12 months production, that will really help, because I'll fly up there against some other guys. The traditional agent's going to say, yeah, I've got 6 testimonials, and my last 12 months predictions, I've been, done 12 transactions, that's great. Traditional agent, that's paying the bills. But then if I'm up above them or down below them, then it shows that I've got, 44 testimonials and, 93 transactions